5 past. I reckon we'll get started. People will come in as we travel along. Let me start the session, if you don't mind, with me just saying, Warami ora nora, Nubari Mari Bayami Gunita Kundurapa, Nubari Mari Nura Nurapa. I'd like to say big love to the traditional people of the land from whatever country we're zooming in from. Pay my respects to our Creator, Bayami, and the Gunita Kun Mother Earth as well, and whatever form of the Creator you believe in. Just want to thank you guys for coming on board for this morning's session. And I'll start by just reading a bit of a bio on you all, if that's all right. Unfortunately, Scott hasn't joined us yet, so hopefully he'll come in at some point. But let me start by introducing Steve Taylor. Steve is a proud Nyampar Wawan man. He's been working for Weigelli Centre for nearly 10 years. Started as an outreach worker to now the AOD field worker. He does the cultural programs at Weigelli Centre and promotes it at any conference he goes to, which is awesome. Next, we've got Alex. Alex was born and grew up in Sydney with Hong Kong heritage. Alex has been volunteering with not-for-profit organisations since he was 15 years old to overcome his shyness and improve his mental health. He has worked with organisations in Australia, Asia and Europe in several areas: mental health, homelessness, refugees and asylum seekers, youth and drug and alcohol addiction. Alex has run volunteer programs in detention centres on Christmas Island and in Darwin. In 2014, whilst Alex was working as a project manager for global accounting firm KPMG, he put his hand up to volunteer at the Glen in a finance and accounting role. Inspired by the Glen's purpose, values and culture, Alex left his consultant role and moved overseas to run a children's charity in Southeast Asia. He continued supporting the Glen virtually while overseas and joined the Glen full-time in 2015. Since then, Alex has been the Deputy CEO of the Glen and is responsible for driving the Glen strategy of self-sustainability and quality improvement, and has been appointed CEO. Congratulations, Alex, on the new appointment of the Glen from July 2020. Alex played a lead role in producing the Glen's feasibility study to establish a women's centre that successfully secured $9 million of federal funding. In the wider alcohol and other drug sector, Alex has worked closely with peak bodies, NADA or NADA and ADARRN, to build data, dashboards, write tenders and improve processes. In his role as CEO, Alex is focused on listening to the board, clients and community and moving the Glen forward. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for coming and joining us. And Matt Stubbs. Matt's a psychologist with over 25 years working in AOD and related fields. Matt is currently Program Manager at Dooralong Transformation Centre. He's previously worked as a Clinical Director, Counselling Clinician, author and educator. Matt is a non-Indigenous man who is passionate about ensuring that people of all backgrounds receive the assistance they require to assist them in effectively managing their lives. Thanks for joining us, guys. I really appreciate your time. I know how busy you all are. I guess I'll just want to open up with a question around, and we might start with Steve and then go with the other guys. He's thinking good on this, Stu. What do you see as some of the major issues kind of leading Aboriginal men to drugs and alcohol nowadays? Just need to unmute yourself. Sorry, Steve. There we go.
I was mucking with you saying that, doing moving the hand gestures. It makes like I knew what I was talking about. I think the environment you grow up in, it just seems to be culture to have a beer after sports, I suppose, beer at home. It just seems to be the norm with, I suppose, the drug and alcohol. It's in your house, it's in your home.
Yeah.
It's a family's house. It's not like a taboo now. It's just the norm.
Yeah, the fact that it's not a taboo is a bit of a scary thought, isn't it? Alex and Matt, would you like to comment on that area at all?
Yeah, I might just jump in. I think with the boys that come in here, you know, they know that taking the drugs and the alcohol, you know, isn't good for them. And so we kind of got to just work out what's all the underlying stuff that's kind of that root cause. And you know, every person has a different story, but I think some of the general things around is, you know, the loss of connection. I think we kind of in the modern society places a lot of emphasis on being individuals, chasing your own goals, doing your own thing. But, you know, humans, we're social animals. You know, we need to belong to a tribe. And a lot of these guys are trying to find, you know, re-find that connection, their tribe, and to belong to something, you know, bigger than themselves. I think that loss of culture as well. You know, one of the first questions our counselors will ask these guys when they come in is, "Who are you?" It's one of the hardest questions that any human has to answer, but a lot of the boys don't know. And reintroducing that back to culture is you know, I personally reckon it's one of the most important steps to that healing process.
Thanks, Alex. No, last but not least, Matt.
Yeah, don't disagree with Steve around the role modelling. Certainly, you know, what we see as kids and what we grow up with is what we then carry through generations. And you know, I reckon that applies to both Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. And, you know, one of the first things I learned in drug and alcohol years ago was the opposite of addiction is positive connection. And so I think what I see from the fellas who are coming in here at Dooralong, and, you know, the people who are coming into a residential service are different to people who are accessing one in the community. Things are pretty much busted. Family relationships are pretty much torn apart. And so there is massive disconnection with perhaps positive family relationships that are there. They've burned a lot of bridges. And so the connections they've got are often with other people who are disconnected. And I mean, we see that starting in schools, because I reckon we go back to education. One of the key things I see out here, particularly for the Indigenous fellows we're working with, is they've been out of school forever and a day. And, you know, they might have been suspended or expelled for doing something wrong, but they've got no one else to hang out with except for the other kids who've been expelled or suspended. And so their connections are with other peers who aren't positive. And I reckon it starts a long journey for them away from those positive connections. So when we had fellas coming out here, you know, they've left school, mate, they're lucky if they made it to year 7. And there's great barriers to them actually then starting to build positive connections. And I reckon the other things that we see is people haven't been able to access services when they need them. And so things have gotten steadily worse and worse and worse along the way. Yeah, but I reckon it's a mixture of those things. And obviously with Aboriginal men that we see and women out here, it is that dispossession, the colonisation and what that's done around erosion of cultural integrity. Yeah, that's another layer.
Thanks, guys. I think there's some really big points in there, especially around the role modelling, but also, Matt, with what you were saying around positive connection. And if you don't mind, I'm going to veer off our normal questions for a second and just ask, what do you guys see as positive connection for communities? Steve, where do you come from with that point?
Positive connection. I think it's like it comes what Matt said with role models. I think if you start at a young age with the youth, I think you get more outcomes, I suppose. Like, it's not saying that the later years they're not going to learn either, but I think if you can start them at a young age with good role models, and that it might be a positive outcome later on in life. That's due to connection to culture or connection with the right positive people. Because sometimes you get stuck with some negative people and they're quite draining.
I think that's a space of not enough strong male leadership in our communities.
Yeah, definitely. There's not they're starting to come out now, but
Yep.
I think shame, I suppose, all. I think people are screaming out for them now, especially in schools.
It's definitely something we see more and more, isn't it? With the work that we do in community and things, is definitely our young fellas screaming out for strong male role models. Alex, what do you think? What do you think positive connection looks like? What's it look like in the Glen?
And I absolutely agree with what Steve and Matt both said. It's about the positive role models. Here at the Glen, it's about, the guys getting out there and doing positive things as well. Everyone, we talk about leadership. Leadership is, you've got to lead by example. And that comes on the staff from your friends and people that they associate themselves with. You've got to surround yourself with a positive tribe. And, part of what we kind of encourage all the guys to do is you kind of go out there, and sometimes when you give and you do community work and you help others, you get a lot, back. And so that's one of the first steps in, being a positive role model yourself, trying to do stuff for others more than yourself.
Yeah, great. And I know I know more so with both Dooralong and and the Glen, that is always so welcoming when it comes to community, having a place within the centres. And I'm sure Weigelli is the same. I just don't get out to Cowra that much. But I have no doubt that it welcomes into that space as well. Just want to point out that please feel free, if you have any questions, to just jump in and ask the panel as well. We'd love for this to be a conversation, not just the panel discussing. So feel free to jump in at any point. Matt, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say about that positive connection, and Alex has hit on it there. And what we try and do within community here at Dooralong is like trying to get people to see that they have stuff of value to give, I think is so important.
Yeah.
The opposite of encouragement is discouragement. And I see of people coming out here, particularly the Aboriginal fellas, there's a lot of discouragements occurred. And that comes from the media, and that comes from, all that racial profiling stuff that we've been seeing in the media recently. But it happens at so many levels. Like, it starts in our education system, that we have education systems that encourage and reward, and I don't mean this to sound harsh, more feminine type behaviours of sitting down, behaving yourself, listening, being quiet. All of those things are rewarded. Being out there, being loud, are things that are discouraged, and you're told to, put a lid on it until sport time or until lunchtime. And so very early on, I think people hear messages of, I've got nothing of value to give to this system. And so they don't see it as a positive connection. So what we try and do here in the rehab is really notice the things that people are doing that are of value to others or to themselves. And we accentuate that. And we don't do it in a plastic American sort of way of shouting it from the rooftops, but we encourage it through ceremony and through giving out awards and stuff. And to me, that's a key fabric to what we do here. There's a level of required helpfulness. Just because you've got mental health problems or your voices in your head doesn't mean you can't make your bed, or doesn't mean you can't be a mentor to a new person who's come in program. We require that helpfulness, and we push it with people. Rather than go, well, you're busted, you're broken, you can't do anything. And it's that encouragement, I think, is what positive connection's about.
And I think you hit on a point there, Matt, in the sense of the society. It's almost like we're breeding toxic masculinity, and how does that play out for people in their adult lives? And a conversation around how do we affirm our young men in the fact that masculinity is a positive thing, and it's how do we channel or utilise that masculinity and support that growing up. Right? I think it's something that we definitely need to discuss as well at some point is how do we view men and males, and how do we support them to grow into be the best males they can be and the best men they can be, and supporting them in that process. So thanks so much for touching on that, because I think it's a hard subject to talk about at times, but I think it's a really important one as well. I'm going to get into a bit more of a deeper question. I haven't opened my chat yet, so I'll also open my chat so I can hear what our community is saying here. But for me, what is a good model? What's a good model of recovery? And I'm sure it varies in all three centres. There are probably things that we do the same. But what do you guys see as a really good recovery model for Aboriginal males? And is there things lacking? I'll open that to anyone to go first.
I think a good care plan to start off with, to see what their goals are, and having the confidence for them to have a say in on how they want to kick their goals, I suppose. But I think the big part is connection to culture. Speaking for Weigelli, we have a lot of followers that come out here and have no connection to culture whatsoever. It's quite sad, or they've had connection and due to drug use or alcohol use, they've lost connection. But we try to make it our mission to reconnect them, but also just give them little bits of culture so they can go back home and have a bit of self-pride.
Yeah.
Actually, knowing where they come from is a positive thing too. So they get that sense of belonging as well.
Affirmation of identity. How important is it? You know who you are, therefore you know where you've been, therefore you know where you can kind of head.
And that has a ripple effect on the families as well. So the kids know who they are, where they belong. Because everyone has this place. It's just finding the right one.
Do you ever find, Steve, that there's shame around that? You know, like someone will come in and there's always this pressure on, and it's going to be a bad example, but you're Aboriginal, so you should be able to play didgeridoo, or you should be able to sing a song, and there's that pressure for men who don't have that, and they can't pass that on to their family.
Yes, not only that, but also the shame factor of not knowing who they are, not speaking in front of crowds, being comfortable with who they are. But I suppose also just not knowing is the saddest part.
Yeah. So it's really around a holistic care plan. So and that obviously you guys would send clients to meetings, AA, and kind of NA meetings. Sorry, I was struggling with the words there. NA meetings as
smart recovery.
Yeah.
Then we've got one-on-one counselling too.
Yeah. Fantastic. Alex, you want to jump in?
Yeah. So I think a couple of years ago, ADAN, which is kind of the network of all the Aboriginal community-controlled resi rehabs, got together to pull together a bit of a model of care, and I think Weigelli was a big part of it as well. And like Steve said, at the forefront of that model is culture. Culture is at the centre. It's the front. It's the most important part, which all the resi rehabs agreed with. Some of the other commonalities, I think one of the things, like, it's hard to have like a model that works in every rehab. We're all in different regions, different places, different challenges. But some of the common themes is we've got to take the holistic approach, address the physical, mental, spiritual health. They've got to be like flexible options to give clients different options of, having that individualized and personalized treatment as well. I think one area, which I think you wanted in your question about what can be done better, is around a bit of a family-based model. I think as male kind of, as a male rehab, that's probably one area we haven't been doing that well in, involving the whole family on the journey. And some of these guys will leave here, then they go back, and the family, the partners, they don't really understand the change that they've gone through, the spiritual journey which they've gone on. And so I don't know what it looks like, but I'm hearing the call that the family needs to get involved in the recovery journey as well. I think Matt already touched on this as well. But we've got to take the strength-based approach when we work with the clients. Like you said, everyone's got something to contribute. We just kind of dig down and help them find their strengths and what they can give, because I think someone mentioned the comments. Yeah, we've all got something to give.
I totally agree. And Phil Pallis has jumped in and said the same thing. He said, nice, Matt. I like the idea of the wounded healer. Even though we stumble, we can all still contribute. And he's so wise in saying that. And I totally agree. And I love the fact that you're exploring the family-based model. You know, when we look at First Nations people, we're relational people. And so when we don't have our family around us or through the process, it's like going on a holiday, you know, and you've nicked off over to France or somewhere. You've had this wonderful experience. You've grown. You've had trials and trepidations and all these things thrown at you, and you come back and you're completely different because you've had a lived experience that no one else has had. And all your friends, you show them photos and you're trying to help them understand what it was like, but they just can't fully understand because they haven't been on the holiday with you. And I think that's just such a wise point, is how do we help families come along on that journey as well? And it's not an easy space, I don't think, because you're dealing with men and people that are probably highly traumatized, that they're coming out of addiction and they're really struggling with getting back onto a path that they feel is good for them and what society may decide is good for them as well. How do you manage that is something that I'd love to wrestle with after I give Matt an opportunity to mention what he feels is a good model.
Can I just butt in for a second? Sorry, Matt.
Yeah.
With what Alex said as well, it also there's a positive as well, like the families are having a break from the client as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes the families are they're copping the full force of them in addiction. So them 3 to 6 months in rehab is a good break for the families and then they can see the change in the client as well. We'll see the change from when they start here to when they finish, but yeah, it's surprising what you see when the family comes out and sees them. Like they're putting on weight, you actually can keep a conversation going with them, and their positive outlook on life.
Great work. Now, Joanne, are you right? Did you need to say something, or you were?
I had the wrong day. I'm tuning in tomorrow.
Okay. No worries at all.
I'll see some of you tomorrow, maybe. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Must have been what you said, Stu.
I'm with you. I have that effect on a lot of people, actually.
Sorry, everyone. Okay.
Thanks, Joanne.
See you tomorrow. Bye.
Matt, did you want to have a yarn around?
Yeah, look, I don't want to sound like I'm parroting. I wish I could disagree. I disagree totally with Alex and Steve. No, I don't. I agree with them totally. Like, you know, and that's where, and I am a non-Indigenous man, so I pray I'm not coming across a bit minimising of culture, but I do believe that person-centred approach is the way to go with anybody. And some of that's because we have some Indigenous fellas coming in here who are real strong in culture and they or they're not and they want to become strong in culture. Whereas we've got other guys who go, yeah, absolutely, I partly identify as Indigenous, but, you know, my other background is Greek and this and that. And you know what? The fact that I'm Indigenous is good. I like to sort of dip a toe in there but not immerse myself in it. And so with those fellas, what we're doing is slightly different to others. So I think that person-centred approach is vitally important no matter who you're working with. And then I agree with Alex around that holistic, you know, the spiritual, the physical, the psychological, the relational, the vocation, education, all of those things need to sit within someone's recovery journey, their goals, as Steve said, you know, setting small goals to start with, building on them as an encouragement. We find most of the guys coming in here when we say, well, what are your goals? They go, oh, to get off the gear and we go, okay, well, what does that look like? And they've got nothing beyond that. And so we actually start working with them on very small goals to build the confidence that they might feel around it. And as, you know, as things become clearer for them, I totally agree around what I reckon is a big missing thing. And I don't have the answer to, is around the family work. None of us live in a vacuum, and you know, And I don't think we do the family work well. I can sit here going, look, we've got people from all over New South Wales, so how are we ever going to do the family work well? You know, we can't connect. You know, if everyone was just from the coast, then absolutely I could have a family worker who engages with families. But often families want respite. You know, Steve said they want a break and they need a break, and the participant needs a break too from family, because they can sometimes have fairly dysfunctional behaviours as well. But there's a time where they need to be brought back together, and I don't think we do that really well in the residential services, and I don't have an answer to that one at the moment. I think the other challenges we face is that continuity of care. So someone comes here and it's quite intensive. Again, you know, if they're going to the back of Burke when they finish here, how does that continuity of care occur? We can make phone calls with them. I just think that's limited. That's the blessing of AA and NA. You know, if you want a support network where you can go to almost any town and get people who understand where you're coming from and have a model of recovery that you understand, I think there's a great strength in AA and NA, the fellowship that way. And the other challenge we face that I don't think we do really well is chronic mental health. I think that's just the acute mental health. Absolutely, we get people to hospital, but your chronic mental health will be there forever and a day, and there's no easy treatment to it, and you're in for the long haul. How we work with that and how we help families to understand that and be engaged with that. One of my only answers around that is I do a lot of referrals off to family drug support, Tony Trimmingham's mob. I think they're one of the key good providers in this area.
Yeah, and I think you're probably speaking to a larger systemic issue there. Is I don't think we in society do chronic mental health well at all. You know, I don't think, and that's my opinion. I'm sure others who are much smarter than me have different opinions in the space, but it's something that I've noted with mental health across the board. I just feel we still don't fully understand it, and we talk it well at the moment, but I don't think we do it well, which is another whole conversation altogether. I'll just check to make sure we haven't got any questions. It doesn't look like we do, so I'm just gonna. Well, hang on, Phil's popped in.
Hey,
hello, Phil. How are you?
I'm very well, mate. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Can I ask a bit of a question? Everyone's talked about, culture and the importance of culture, and whether that's like Alex and Steve saying that's, foundational and really central, and Matt sort of saying, a bit more person-centered, but definitely culture is in there. We know that, a lot of people think that cultural practice, ceremonial practice in New South Wales isn't occurring anymore, but in fact it is, and there's many, many men involved in that cultural practice and continuing cultural practice. What are the challenges in taking what happens in that space and moving that into a service provision space like the Glen or like where Steve is or at Dooralong? What are the challenges in actually living out some of that cultural practice, and who has authority to do those sort of things and lead the dancers in a service provision space, I guess?
That's an awesome question. Steve, do you want to talk to that at all?
But cultural practice, I suppose it just has to be. They don't have to go through ceremony. I think giving them a sense of belonging, teaching them that they're about country, because all the countries are the same. Like you look on the big maps of Australia, it's got about 260 tribes on there. Mother Earth don't stop at the boundary. It goes all the way to the waters, and also into the waters with the stories. Story connect everyone together. I think little bits of story you give them, and hopefully when they go back home to their own country, they can link up with the right old followers to actually follow through with that ceremony, even if it's females as well. You don't have to do the big dance to shed, but if you get small pieces every time and you build on that, it's a lifetime of learning. But if you can kick goals by stopping your addiction that blinds you from getting your connection to culture, then you can hopefully move on from there.
Great points. Does anyone else? Do you guys want to jump into that space as well?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to jump in and just say, we're a non-Indigenous service, and I think one of the things I'm pretty clear on as the program manager is, look, the stuff we don't know, we should never be a silo. We should never operate on our own. We don't do it around mental health. I don't do it around physical health. And so around cultural health, when people start to talk about this is a direction I want to investigate, we're actually helping them find the place to investigate that. So we do hook in with the Glen. The Glen had an aftercare worker who was being funded before COVID, and I'm assuming still, and we connect fellas in with him who want to have that connection. Equally, we connect people in with Yaron. So I suppose when it comes to that Indigenous side, that's what we do there. We go, okay, well, who are our connections who can help people grow in this place? Because I certainly can't. I can be a facilitator. I can be one who says we welcome that. And so like out here at Dooralong, what's that look like? Well, Reconciliation Week, we always do have our focus of our groups and that around Reconciliation Week and bringing all up to a sense of what's that about? Why is it important? What isn't it? What is it? And then, NAIDOC Week, we head off to events and things like that. And all of community goes. Like here, all of our community will go. We don't force people, but we make it that it's a pleasurable choice. And because I think it's important. And then beyond that, as we start to develop those individualised case management plans, spiritual/cultural practice and what are your goals around that, or what are the things they are individually planned for as well. So that's how we come at it as a non-Aboriginal service.
That's the same as the Glen. Like, if you can involve everyone in culture, it's going to be special for everyone. But if you make it for a certain group, it's not going to be fun. Like Glen involves everyone in their dances. It makes it a part of the program. Like when we do our cultural program out here, we involve our non-Indigenous clients. So colour is not an option out here. It's as long as you embrace yourself in it and learn a little bit about it, because non-Indigenous people go back to their hometown and explain what they did at Weigelli. Being involved in culture is better than sitting back watching it.
Yeah, so it's a community approach. It's hey, we're not worried about skin or colour. It's you're completely welcome in this space, and I love that. I really love that, 100%.
Yeah, I guess here at the Glen, so we're an Indigenous corporation, but we have Indigenous and non-Indigenous clients, and all the kind of cultural dance that we do and all the other activities, we always say it's celebratory, it's not ceremonial, and so we kind of explain that at the start, and everyone's welcome to join in. One of our senior counsellors here, Glen, he'll explain all that, and you just open it up and he shares with everyone, and like Steve said, I guess that kind of way of sharing allows non-Indigenous, even Asian fellas like myself, to really kind of learn and be part of it, which I think is it's really awesome. And then if guys do want to kind of get more into it, more in depth, and learn about ceremony, then that's when we talk to like yourself, Stu, Chris. We link them up with the right people who can take that to the next level.
Which is a great point, because I was going to ask what leadership's needed in this space, but just parrying off the back of what you guys have said, and Matt and I had a conversation about this last week in ways, and I won't allude into that, but I guess another question for me is around what role is community having to play? Because by the sounds of it, what you're saying is that it's not just the centre. We actually need community in and involved in that recovery process and in the care plans and those types of things. So how do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, the last thing I want people coming in is, coming in drug dependent and leaving Dooralong dependent, because, once we start to do that, we become a bottleneck, and people don't move on from here. And, we talk with people about this is a time and a place in your life now. And, at this time, our job is to help you arm yourself with as many things you need in your, as many arrows you need to fight your battle, and they're your support people, they're your support networks. Now, that can be really challenging for some of the fellas who are just so dislocated, and there's been many, many years of addiction and incarceration, that there isn't a lot of family, that there isn't a lot of positive connections or services. And so, again, for us, we go back to some of the bare essentials. We have transitional houses around the coast where some of those fellas will transition into that, and they'll build their support networks from there. And they'll often be embedded fairly deeply in like the fellowship and stuff like that. Equally as, you know, the Salvation Army, we're a Christian organisation, and so when people come here, they do go to chapel and church. And part of that is, you know, part of it's also just trying to give them a positive connection in the community where there's a bunch of people who should love on them. Because, you know, most of us, that's what we want, that's what we need to live our lives, or all of us need that. And some people don't have that. And so our job is to keep people looking for where are they going to get those needs met and that avenue available. I think it's been interesting around this time of the coronavirus. We've had people, we've kept about 90% occupancy, and we've had hardly anyone leave. We've had people ready to complete program who are going, I can't leave now because I can't connect in with my supports, and they're vitally important to my healthy recovery. Or equally, fellas who are partway through program, we haven't been able to continue to get those connections happening because many of the services went, you know, online, and that hasn't been as good for our fellas as others might think it has, I don't think.
Yeah, nice. We've just had Uncle Scott come in and join us as well. How are you, Unc? You going all right? Sorry, just need to unmute yourself. Hang on.
Yep.
How you going?
Yeah, good. Sorry, am I late?
Yeah, I thought you might have mixed the times up. So as far as Sydney time and SA time. So how are you travelling? That's all right, Unc.
Good. Sorry about
that. We're just having a bit of a conversation around the importance that community plays in the recovery process, and how important it is to have people coming into the centres or assisting through recovery. Do you want to have a bit of a yarn? Sorry, just for everyone to know that Scott's the director. I've got a
CEO.
CEO of
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you want to give just a quick brief or intro of yourself, Unc, or I can read the bio for you if you like?
Well, what do you want me to talk about, myself or what I do?
Yourself and what you do.
Okay. Well, I suppose I'm originally from Darwin. I grew up there. My family is part of the stolen generation, so most of my family still live in Darwin. I've got about 30 family members still up there. Obviously, I started drinking and taking drugs. Hang on, I'll just shut the door. Sorry.
That's all right.
I started drinking and taking, everyone here knows anyway, probably from about first year high. When I was about 13, my mum died on the last day of school, and you know, so I started getting into the grog, started getting arrested by the police all the time because I'm 6'4", so I had no problem going straight to the bottle shops in Darwin, and you know, we always used to get $2 pocket money, and that used to be enough to buy a bottle of sweet sherry. Filthiest drink you can ever imagine. But at the end of the day, me and my mate would scull that, and that'd get us drunk. And then if we missed the bus, we'd have to walk home. It took me a while because I used to think the police were always picking on me because I was getting arrested. And this is well before they had youth detention centres, so I'd be put into the lockup. With adults and things like that. So that continued for quite some time. I started getting into other illicit substances. I've been in and out of jail, obviously a few times for those sort of crimes. It wasn't until 1993, I suppose. So I spent probably 20 years in and out of sort of jail and things like that, trying to work out what the problem was. And in about 93, Aboriginal Drug and Alcohol Council, which was set up as a result of the Royal Commission, it was community response into the Royal Commission in the Black Deaths in Custody, offered me a job. And one of the things is I had to sign a sobriety clause, and that sort of set me on the, I was the admin officer to start off with. There was only two of us. And then a couple of years later, I ended up becoming the director, and I've been the director / CEO since 1995. We currently, I've been on probably nearly every government drug strategy type committee you can think of. I was appointed 3 times by Prime Minister Howard onto the Australian National Council of Drugs, Deputy Chair of the National Indigenous Drug and Alcohol Council. I was a founding director of what used to be called the Alcohol Education and Rehabilitation Foundation for 11 years, which is now called the Foundation for Alcohol Research and Education, FAIR. And in that time, we now employ probably 50 people across the state, where we operate a residential rehab in Port Augusta. We operate 2 day centres in Port Augusta, Ceduna, a mental health service, a youth service and an employment service. And the day centres are interesting because basically last year, for example, we fed or provided over 30,000 meals to mainly, well, not mainly, but the majority of the people who come to the day centres in Ceduna and Port Augusta are transient traditional folk from either the APY lands or from places like Yalada and stuff like that. So they come a long way. And then unfortunately, when they get to these towns, they get caught there. So, you know, for them to go home from Port Augusta could be a 7-hour drive if they've got a vehicle. From Ceduna to Oak Valley, for example, 600 kilometres on a dirt road. We run a mobile treatment service as well called Making Tracks, and they try and visit all those rural remote communities. So I suppose from our perspective, we don't just deal with one substance, you know, whether it's petrol sniffing or methamphetamine or heroin. We run a needle syringe program here where I am. So yeah, we have to be on top of everything. We were the first organisation in the country, for example, that in 1995 we started producing resources about fetal alcohol, and people were abusing us to sort of say that there was no such thing. Whereas now fetal alcohol is obviously, you know, one of the new flavours of the month, I suppose. It's been sort of recognised internationally. I can remember going to the first World Fetal Alcohol Conference, and there was only 12 Australians out of 1,500 people. So it tells you how far we've come. So yeah, that's in a nutshell. Obviously, I could sit here all day, but
we had a wonderful conversation the other day, and I left just so full of knowledge, and I was just so surprised. And just tying it back to our current conversation around community, just with the day centres, you know, 30,000 meals shows how important you guys are in community, and just even that element of a cultural model, you know, mob turn up, they need a feed, they need to be looked after. And so that's what community does, you know, is exactly what you're talking about. And the fact of being stuck there and not being able to get home and those things would be a huge issue that you guys are dealing with constantly. And for me, that was just such an eye-opener to have that conversation. I'm conscious of time, but I really want, if it's okay, if you could explain a little bit about the app that you guys developed, because part of why I was really keen to have you on is this app, and I actually went through it the other night and thought it was really, really great. And thank you for sending it to me. But I think it may even help the other guys. So just your other panelists here, we've got Matt Stubbs from Dooralong there, and we've got Alex Lee from the Glen, and Steve Taylor from Weigelli, which is a centre out at. These guys are all New South Wales based. So yeah, it'd be cool if you could have a little bit of a yarn about this app if they haven't heard about it.
Yep. Okay. Well, we sort of came across the idea of developing a computer, an iPad app, basically on the fact of the matter is, you've all heard of the National Drug Strategy Household Survey. Well, we know, for example, that the Household Survey underreports women's consumption by about 700%, right? So it's not necessarily accurate. Of the 20,000 people that they used to do it all by come around and do an interview, whereas now what they do is they phone up 20,000 Australians across the country, and what they do is, they've got to have male, female, they've got to be different ages, they've got to be rural, remote and urban, and throw into that the mix, you've got to have Aboriginal people. So they basically survey across Australia about 450. So for example, in South Australia, there'd be 21 Aboriginal people that would get surveyed. The household survey is what guides New South Wales government or the federal government in terms of what they're going to fund. And so, for example, you go back a few years ago, the reason why they kept saying there was no methamphetamine wasn't really a major problem is because the household survey kept saying that only less than 3% of Australians had consumed methamphetamine in the last couple of years. We already knew, and you probably did yourself, that methamphetamine's been a problem now for well over a decade. And the reason why I started thinking about it is because our chairperson, who at the time, well, she's in her 80s now, kept coming in asking me why people would ask her for the old, if you remember the old incandescent light bulbs. So people were asking her for, oh, have you got a light bulb, Arnie? And she couldn't work it out. So what they did is they knock off the bayonet part, put their meth in there, and were heating it up, and that's how they would sort of. So we went through as you probably did, we went through the heroin sort of wave, then the meth wave. Anyway, so most Aboriginal people picked up that whole smartphone technology pretty simply. So we thought, well, there's an opportunity for us to sort of look at putting all these questions onto an iPad app, and basically get people, if they're coming into the Glen or into a AMS or whatever, whilst they're waiting to see their health worker or their doctor, you could give them the iPad. It takes about 10 minutes to do. It has a whole range of questions. Or if you were thinking about, doing some sort of intervention, for example, an alcohol intervention into a community, you could survey, which we've done. We've surveyed whole remote communities, and we can now give back to that community. Here's a snapshot of what your community is, how many people are there, what ages they are, what we want to know is what they actually, when they drink, what do they consume and at what levels they do consume, right? And then at the end of the app, there's a whole range of tips that they could sort of either use to maybe try and stop drinking or seek help or things like that. It doesn't just ask about alcohol, it asks whether, you've been harmed or you've harmed others. So there's a whole range of sort of things there. The interesting thing from our perspective is obviously when you come onto the app, it asks you whether you're male and female, and that's important because if you say you're female, then all the images after that actually change to female. If you're male, they change to male. It also, we've had it translated in the Pitjantjatjara. So if you're remote person or a Pitjantjatjara speaker, you click on that Pitjantjatjara and you actually start hearing all these sort of questions in your own language rather than trying to struggle through in English. It's all touchscreen, so somebody's asking you questions. There'll be, you know, on the iPad, for example, we've probably got every conceivable alcohol product you can think on there. You select what you drink. We imagine, or we know that not everyone's got nice little glasses so they can have a standard drink. So we know that people might be using Mount Franklin water bottles, slushy containers, Coke cans, whatever, to fill up their share of the cask of wine, for example. And you can slide your finger up to sort of say how full that is. So the app will then automatically calculate in the background how many standard drinks you might be consuming in that session, right? And so, for example, I can tell you, I can go to a community and I can tell you that when people are drinking, they're drinking at high levels, i.e. between 18 and 22 standard drinks a session, which if you think about that, a lot of those people would fit the definition of alcoholic. But what happens in particular in these remote communities is if there's a death and they have to go to sorry camp where they can't drink, it's not as if they go through detox and then have to, you know, before they go, they just go straight away. So I believe anyway that a lot of Aboriginal folk are constantly detoxing. So whenever they go back, so the app, I could sit here all day talking about it.
Yeah, I won't let you talk all day.
You're right. But one of the things that we're thinking, one of the things that we've now been funded is to develop a drug app. Alcohol is a drug, but actually the app that we'll be looking at and looking at sites to trial it and all of that sort of stuff will focus on heroin, methamphetamine, cannabis, tobacco, those sorts of things. You can, if you wanted to get a copy of the app or view the copy of the app, basically at the moment it's just in its beta form with the view that it'll be available free on the App Store. But if you want to have a look at it now, you can just send me an email, scott@adac.org.au, and we can send you a link, and you can, as long as you've got an iPad, you can download it. And then you can just play with it as much as you want because the beta version isn't collecting any data. It'll just collect your own or whoever. You can email the results to your health worker or to your doctor so that by the time you get to see them, they've got a bit of a snapshot about you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for filling us in on that, Unc. And I'm sorry we've run out of time because the stuff we were talking about. I think you're a wealth of knowledge, and you know, being CEO for what 20-something years now, you've definitely been right through many eras in the alcohol and drug sector. So thank you so much. Just as a final point, because we've got another session starting, can I ask the panel, is there any final words you kind of want people to focus on when dealing with Aboriginal males in the alcohol and drug sector? Is there any final pearls of wisdom you would like to leave us with, or even a statement around the work that you're doing? Anything at all? Is there something you would just like to say? Would you? Alex, you want to kick off?
Oh, I'll just say that I think we're all on this journey together. You know, we're all different services, but the issue is bigger than us as organisations. And yeah, we're keen to learn from each other. So I'm going to take up Matt's offer to invite you over to the Glen. I'll visit over there. And Steve, I think Norm always talks about us coming down, so we'll make that happen as well.
You might even have to go over to South Australia to visit the ultimate.
Absolutely. Once the borders are unlocked.
Open again. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you when you might want to come. We also host the National Indigenous Drug and Alcohol Conference every 2 years here in Adelaide. And I'm pretty sure the Glen and some of the others have also, we have national awards. We initially were going to have it was supposed to be in November, but it's been postponed to March next year. So if any of you are interested, you can go to the website, nightoutconference.com. We have abstracts. You can put in an abstract, or you can register to come. So that's a good opportunity. We get about 300 to 400 Aboriginal folk from around the country. And this conference entertainer is Kevin Caprinri, who's an Aboriginal comedian at the conference dinner. So yeah, come along. It's actually quite a good opportunity to catch up and share with a whole range of other Aboriginal folk from across Australia.
Great, thanks, Alan. Matt, you got anything you want to leave us with?
No, look, just thanks, Stu, for having me on the panel, and it's been nice to get to know what the other fellas are doing. Steve out there, yeah, Caraway, it'd be lovely to get out there. It'd be a bit cold, I imagine, at the moment. Look, I suppose for me, one of the mantras for us we talk about out here is healthy recovery is greater than never using drugs again. And I think, you know, we've hit the tip of the iceberg that we often end up talking about the drugs, or we end up, but it's everything else that's below that. I mean, you can choose never to use again, but still have a miserable existence. And it's about helping people find meaning in their life. And yeah, and I think for Aboriginal people, that journey, you know, as a non-Aboriginal person, I imagine must be full of pain, heartache, and lots of dead ends. But our job is to journey with people so that when a dead end hits, we can find another avenue to walk together. And yeah, we're just humble. I'm humbled as a non-Aboriginal man to have done that with lots of fellas and continue to do it here at Dooralong. Yeah.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks so much for being on the panel. And Steve, any final words of wisdom for us?
No wisdom here, but it's good to see that everyone's on the right track. But I think it's just get to know the clients, because the drug use is just a mask for something deeper. So we can work out what's going on and hopefully stop them, so we can have stronger role models in our community.
Thanks heaps. I can't thank you all enough for coming in, and thanks, Uncle Scott, for bailing in as well and sharing so much in a tiny amount of space. We really appreciate it. I am hoping these conversations will continue above and beyond this place, but we're hoping to host numerous conversations now throughout a period of time. So hopefully we can get you guys back on again at another time and we continue the conversation. So it's not the final say. I just hope we can keep moving along in this space and moving towards better health outcomes.
Yeah, I'll just apologise that obviously I was late. Yeah, so...
Not an issue, Unc. I, as we said, this won't be the last opportunity for a conversation, and I think you've got so much to say that I'm so keen to hear as well.
No.
Not an issue.
Okay.
Thank you so much, gents.